Please welcome back to the stage, Miss Esther Aguilera.
Thank you, and thank you, Jennifer, for helping keep everything moving and all your assistance. Welcome back, everyone. First, a little housekeeping. We have evaluations on your table. Guess what? We're not going to let you leave the room because we do want to hear from you. Let us know what you liked and what you want to see next year. So don't forget, before you leave the room, to complete those. We're going to continue with our program, and we're delighted and absolutely honored to have the Honorable Scott Stringer, New York City Comptroller, with us today. He has been doing some innovative things and really leading an important charge, so I look forward to hearing more about that. He serves as the city's chief financial officer. The comptroller is responsible for safeguarding the fiscal health of the city, rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse in city government, and ensuring the effective performance of city agencies in serving the needs of New Yorkers. Mr. Stringer is also the investment advisor, custodian, and trustee of the city's $160 billion pension funds, and is responsible for protecting the retirement security of over 700,000 New Yorkers. You have his full bio. I wanted to give you some important highlights. So please join me in welcoming the Honorable Scott Stringer. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everybody. No, good afternoon. You know, it's Friday, so I'm really honored to be here, and I want to really thank the Latino Corporate Directors Association. I want to thank Esther, and I'm really excited to kick off this important panel and give you some of our insight in terms of what diversity means. And I'm somebody who grew up in Washington Heights, which is right above Harlem, for those of you who are visiting. I grew up in a neighborhood of great diversity, and I really believe it shaped my thinking and my view of the world. Today, I'm raising, with my wife, 2 little boys. One is 5.5 and one is 4. And no, they're not my grandchildren, they're actually my children, but it's okay, people. And I tell you about them because I want them to grow up in a city and a world where everybody can understand the culture and the history of everybody. And for me, it means the work that we do now in government can, I think, really change society. And part of what that means is how we can focus our attention to make sure that we actually create a path for success as people of all different backgrounds seek to create wealth for individual communities. And that is a strategy that we have to continue to move on. We see what happens when we don't have leadership in the corporate boards or in the C-suite. We see bad decisions are made because there's not enough diversity at the table. That certainly is part of what's happening right now in our White House, especially as we look to what's happening to the 3.5 million people living in Puerto Rico, and we realize that we are not doing what we should be doing for American citizens. And I want to mention that to all of you because this is a true outrage in our country, and it should anger us greatly. You may not realize, but I have a Latino background, so you can't judge a book by its cover. About 35 years ago, my mother started dating a very nice Puerto Rican gentleman, and he would come to our house when we were teenagers and try to ask my mother out, and we would say, no, you can't stay over, and we would make sure that we protected our mother because we didn't want her to date anybody. But one day, my mother comes home because I was a political kid, and she says, you know, Carlos is about to be the deputy borough president of the Bronx. And I was like, come on, really? And then I read in the newspaper that here is this very qualified Latino man to be the first deputy borough president of Bronx. He would later be the city clerk replacing David Dinkins. So when he came into my house with my mother to celebrate this amazing appointment in city government, I looked at the paper and I looked at him and I said, "Hello, Dad." And it changed. You should marry my mother. And they did get married with full support from all the kids. And we have had a relationship in our family to Puerto Rico for over 35 years. But I also know that part of that ability to learn about other cultures is really what drives us all. And today, when you think about the young people who are growing up and getting the best education, and they come from different backgrounds, women, people of color, and they get into the world of finance, and they start that entry-level position, and suddenly they're doing great, right? They get the job, they have the education, and somehow that elevator on the way to the top seems to always get stuck, right? So we don't see women, people of color, at the corporate board level or the C-suite. Today, so few women serve on corporate boards. 5% of Latinos serve on the corporate board S&P 500 companies in this country. It is simply outrageous. And now we have to think about, what do we do? And one of the things that I was able to do as controller was build an opportunity to organize public pension funds around the country, $1 trillion in assets, to say to companies who basically had all these corporate boards that looked exactly like me, only with better suits, and say it is not acceptable anymore to have boards that are all male, all pale, and all stale. We need diversity. And this is true. And we have to leverage our collective assets to force that change. So we started the Boardroom Accountability Project. 6 companies in the U.S. allowed for the right of share owners like myself to run independent directors at companies. So if we were not happy with company policy, we could run a director. This was not part of the financial landscape 4 years ago. Today, we have won the right to run directors at over 400 companies, and we continue to target the companies that don't believe or practice diversity. Now, why do we do this? Yes, I admit it's about civil rights and empowerment, but the real reason a public pension fund is concerned about the corporate boards is because when we invest in companies, I got to know that those boards are doing their job, right? So if we see a board that's more interested in the excess pay of a CEO and not worrying about the share owners, we're going to question that. If we're worried about a corporate board that's an energy company, or a corporate board that runs an energy company, and they don't talk about climate change, we worry about that, right? And if we see a company with no diversity, we always worry about it, because at the end of the day, that company is not going to perform better than companies with diversity. And part of it is that a company that is all the same people suffers from groupthink, right? So if you have people who live in Connecticut, go to the same country clubs, come from the same background, their friends come from the same background, they are going to be limited in their experiences. And that's where a public pension fund has to worry about our investments, because when you have a diverse board, you have different opinions, you have a back and forth, you have strategy. I always felt that one of the reasons why we had Enron and WorldCom is because the same guys saw the same thing, and they failed to react. And that is something that we incorporate in the public pension sphere. This is what I worry about, because I can't, as someone who makes thousands of investments, a $195 billion pension fund, I can't watch every investment. We can't watch every investment. We need to rely on the boards of these companies, and that is why diversity is important to us. But it's also about leadership as well. Many cities, and many of you come from different places, but I'll give you one example about New York City. We spend $15 billion a year on procurement, right? We hire law firms, accounting firms. We buy paper clips and pencils. The greatest, most diverse city in the world, right? 40% of the people here are foreign-born. Of that $15 billion spend, only 4.8% of that money goes to women and minority-owned businesses. You know what I'm saying? 4.8% in New York City. You know, we're not in Idaho, folks, right? This is the most I shouldn't criticize. And if you are from Idaho, I really apologize. But you know, this happens to me a lot. There's always someone who says, you know, I'm from Idaho. What's your problem? You know, you're Idaho-phobic. But think about this. So in New York City, we're at 4.9%. We said enough with this. We started letter grading agencies saying, no, you fail. If you can't find women and minority-owned businesses, then we as a city are not doing well. We've engaged in a 4-year fight with our agencies, and we are seeing progress because when we started raising this and analyzing the agencies based on their spend, we started to create an uproar. Commissioners would come in and say, please don't give us an F. I said, you didn't spend money with anybody who didn't look differently than you or your commissioners. And the reason they gave was because they said, well, you have to understand in our business, we don't see a lot of diversity. And I said, well, wait a minute. This is like New York, and you could hire food vendors, right? Do you know how many different food vendors we have? I see African-American lawyers all the time, right? We see Latino insurance brokers all the time. There has to be a will to empower people in city and state government. We have to practice what we preach. At the end of the day, this is also important because the way we bring people up is we allow folks to create wealth in our communities. And that is essential. When you're in the business of finance, what are you doing? You're creating wealth. A lot of people who do investments are not in it solely for the good of their heart. But when someone is successful, there is this feeling of giving back to the community from where you come. But if we shut the door in the finance world to women, to Latinos, to Asians, to African Americans, then the only give back, the only way to create wealth will be limited to the people who already have the wealth. And that doesn't benefit our city, our society, my children, your children, and most of all, the children you're never going to meet. So I just want to say to all of you that this Corporate Directors Association can play a critical role and be a critical voice, whether it's public pension funds or cities or state associations. We have to begin the real work of demanding that we have corporate board diversity. I just sent out a letter to 150 companies, and I've asked them for the following information. One, I say, I invest in you on behalf of the 715,000 retirees in our city. And here's the information I want. I want to know the experience of your directors, right? I have a right to that. I want to know if you're putting qualified people on the board. I also want, in addition to their experience, I also want to know their background, what was, you know, and their skill set. So what makes a director for your company? What skills are you looking for? And then the third thing I asked for is I said, I'd like to know the gender of the people on your board, because I want to know where you are in terms of diversity. And finally, I want you to give me the race of the people on the boards. These questions have never been asked by the fourth largest public pension fund in the United States of America. And I'm asking them for this information because we are going to do our due diligence. We're not going to just rely on when you send out your board of director list, right? You notice there are never any pictures, right? The line is this. And so I want your information because I'm going to catalog it, I'm going to analyze it, and then we're going to go to your nominating committee and say, you know, we're going to find you candidates because clearly you're not finding your own candidates. The other thing we're doing, and I'll end with this, is I've also said to the people who manage our money, right, $195 billion, that's a lot of money to manage, right? I've also said to the money managers, I want to see the same kind of data because I know that if you are not a diverse company managing our money, then we do not have a leg up. And if you don't give me this information, we're not going to do business with you anymore. The good news is I am getting the information. The bad news is some of that information is not where we want it to be, but I'm happy with a company who comes to me and says, we're not diverse. We have not practiced this well, but we're willing to work with you to change the way we do things. And if we get corporate America to think like that, we will then change the dynamic in this country, create more wealth in our cities and our neighborhoods, give more young people the opportunity to live the American dream, and hopefully we will create the kind of retirement security that our parents and grandparents hope to have. So good luck with this conference. You're in for a great panel. Michael Garland from my office is a real national thought leader on this. I took all of his good talking points, so I don't know what he's going to say, but I got elected, so whatever. Thank you very much. Thank you.